We good, Logan? All right, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. Any first-timers here to one of the Saturday seminars, right? Awesome. Thanks for coming. Yeah, awesome. We'll have the privilege of filling in for Pastor Luke today. I think he knows that this topic in particular I'm get a little passionate about. My concentration at seminary was in church administration, so he was kind enough to let me take this session and this week, and excited to dig in with you guys. Let's go ahead and pray as we begin, and then we'll introduce the material and dive into it. Father, what a joy it is to gather this morning and to consider the truths of your word. It's our desire as members of a church, of a family of faith. Our desire is to execute church, to see it grow in a way that you have instructed us and in a way that is honoring to you. We pray that you would go before our time and be our teacher this morning. Through Christ's name we pray. Amen. Awesome. Well, it's good to see you all. As is our practice as we start each one of these sessions and seminars, is to provide some recommended reading. I don't know how, I had tons of books on my shelf about church governance and whatnot. I don't know how exciting that is for you guys to read about. So I only brought two because I figured, all right, I don't know how many people are going to be reading about this stuff, but two I want to draw your attention to that I like in particular, and there's others. This one's called Biblical Eldership by Alexander Schrock. Very well-known sort of gold standard type book when we talk about church governance. Highly recommended. You could always take a picture of that if you'd like. Biblical Eldership. This one I really like and really gleaned a lot of material from this and an understanding. It's called Experiencing Leader Shift by Don Cousins. More of a lot easier of a read, less sort of thick and just really practical. So I want to encourage you to check that out as well. And I'll leave it there. There's others. But in fact, when I went through the elder process, there were 3 books we had to read and write book reports on. It's pretty intense and fun. But no, those are 2 really good go-to materials. As we begin, I want to pass out some handouts for us to be contemplating this morning. So if you would just take one and pass. Thank you, guys. If you've been with me for any length of time, it's not a class without a handout, right? Logan? And thick paper. Oh, I'm known to be a paper snob, so you appreciate the thickness in that paper, please. Although I didn't have a good cutter, so I hand cut those, are a little jacked up, but 28-pound paper only for me. I love it. So on that handout is a list of 5 the term Pastor Luke often uses in his classes, theological propositions. So they will serve as sort of the 5 main headings for our time this morning. So as you know, this is session number 3 of the semester on ecclesiology. Okay, and where's my clicker? Here it is. Okay, so we'll just spend a little bit on review to get those up to speed who might not have been with us since the beginning for this semester. And before we do that, I want to draw your attention to sorry, Logan, this screen I need to be pointing at, right? I want to draw your attention to the title because when Pastor Luke provided that title, I thought, what a perfect outline for our time this morning. So we're really going to be taking this title and breaking it into 3 parts. We're going to talk about ordered, household, and then the church as in that order. And I'm grateful for him to have, maybe even unbeknownst to him, provided a really solid outline for us this morning. So let's review where we've been this semester. Again, the topic is ecclesiology. Okay, ology meaning what? The study of, yep, okay. And then ecclesia, ecclesia, which is the Greek word from where we get the word church. Assembly is the literal translation. So when we talk about the church, it's literally the assembly of the called out ones. Nice, thanks, Dave. No, that was good. Thank you for doing that.
Nobody else? All right.
So when we talk about ecclesiology, we're talking about the study of and the meaning of, the purpose of, and the practice of the church, okay? So that's been the overall theme for this semester. Ecclesiology is known as one of the, I'm bringing you back a couple semesters now, which types of theology? Pastor Luke in his first semester, I believe, two ago, systematic theology, good, okay? So this is the systematizing of the scriptures relative to the topic of the church and how God would have us, why the church exists, how it's organized, which we'll talk about today. That's the theme of this semester, ecclesiology. Okay? Now, so far this semester, first two sessions, Pastor Luke started off with the church as God's idea. And if you haven't looked at that or explored that teaching, I encourage you to check that out on YouTube. And then last month, the church as a covenant people. Okay, so those were the first two sessions. Today we'll look at, again, the church as an ordered household. Okay. Now, again, by way of review, this was sort of the foundational understanding of the entirety of the semester is what is the purpose of the church? And Pastor Luke walked us through these three purposes that the church exists for. Number one, to display God's wisdom through worship. Okay, and not just worship with our lips, but with our minds, with our one anothering, all that goes into gathering as a church and interacting with one another. And then proclaiming God's gospel, and then exalting his son. Okay, so that will remain the foundation of everything that we're talking about this semester, and that is to strive to look to fulfill the purpose of God's church. Okay, so this morning in particular, we're going to dive into, again, a couple theological propositions under the heading of the church is an ordered household, and what does that mean? Okay, so let's start with theological proposition number one, if you will, and if you're a note taker and you can fill in the blank there, feel free to do so. The first one is God is a God of order. Okay, and I'm going to attempt to show you that in the scriptures and defend that proposition. God is a God of order. When you think about the word order, if I were to ask you to write a dictionary definition of order, how might you pen that?
Sequence events.
Okay.
Opposite of chaos.
You must have seen my notes. That's good. That was good, Joe. Sequence of events, opposite of chaos. Good. Anybody else that would add to that?
A place for everything and everything in its place.
Yes. Remember mom and dad saying that?
Yeah.
Relative to like cleaning your room, right? Pretty much. That's good. God is a God of order. Let's take a look at what the scriptures say. Here's 1 Corinthians 14. By the way, we will mostly use the ESV today. Every once in a while, I'll depart from that. And if I think another translation better captures the understanding of the original. So in this case, this is from the New King James. And Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians 14. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. By the way, that was good. When I preached last time, I had everybody say out loud the highlighted words. You guys kept that practice. I like that. As in all the churches of the saints. Now, quick little side note for you Bible nerds. The reason why I chose New King James, if in your Bible there's a comma after saints and a period before as, which takes that phrase and applies it to the next verse. A little bit of a debate on which phrase Paul meant to relate as in all of the churches to the saints. I think this is probably more accurate, which is why I chose this particular translation. But God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. Let's take a look at the original from those two words, confusion and peace. Okay, the word confusion in the Greek is, akatastasia. Akatastasia. Try to say that with me. No, I won't make you do that. When we see the letter A in front of a Greek word, what does that mean? Anybody know?
Without or missing.
Yeah, it's the opposite of missing, without. Okay, so akatastasia is without order. So Paul's telling us God is not the author of confusion. He doesn't lack order, but of peace. The Greek word there, irene. I actually interviewed a girl the other day for our coffee shop, and her first name is Irene. And I hadn't prepared for this yet. I thought, well, that's an interesting first name. Never heard that before. Now I know what it means. I thought it was pretty cool. Meaning tranquility or harmony. Now, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Paul's choice of the use of the word peace here? For God is not the author of confusion, but we might have come up with a different sort of opposite word there to confusion. It's interesting to me that he chose peace, certainly under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he chose that word. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. Any thoughts on why that's the sort of opposing thought there to confusion? Dave?
He says a sense of being settled.
Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Unity?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about your own homes, right? Things are a little confusing, chaotic. There's not order and structure to it. Go ahead, Chris.
Peace also oftentimes associates with trust.
Mm.
At that point, you're putting your trust in something that will give you peace.
Yeah. It's good. All of this is good. Anybody else? Okay. God is the God of order, not of confusion. Do you have something? Yeah, please, Logan.
I just like that concept of order because the Greek for anxiety and worry is divided. That's what it means in this original translation. So opposite of division is order.
Yeah.
And there is peace in order. There is no peace in worry. There's no peace in anxiety, which is the confusion of the culture that's around us.
Yeah. Think about the text in Philippians, right? You know, about the exhortation not to worry, right?
Yeah.
But the peace of God that surpasses, understanding for sure. That's good. Okay. Later on in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul continues. He says this, for all things, but all things should be done decently and in order. Okay. So it's no longer the A in front of the Greek word without order, but the root word, that word order there is the root of the original that we looked at, and it's the word taxis, which means order. Okay? So all things done decently and in order. And again, this morning we're going to unpack what are the prescriptions from the scriptures on how to apply that and honor that and follow through with that in the church. Now, when we think about order, maybe even philosophically, okay, let me propose that order assumes a few things. Okay, well, let's take a look at this. Order assumes, tell me your thoughts, you feel free to push back. Order assumes a few things. Order assumes there are parts. Okay? Probably don't need order if there aren't parts to something. Order assumes that those parts interrelate to one another. And order assumes that those parts that are interrelating, okay, are working towards the same goal. Okay? One of the reasons why we know that God doesn't have parts, that he's what we call divine simplicity. Okay? He doesn't have parts. He's not lacking anything. Parts can also assume sometimes change. The Trinity, for example, is not the exemplification of parts of God. Okay? But when we talk about order, especially in the context of ecclesiology in the church, we see this playing out, that there are parts, that they interrelate, and that there's one goal. And so how might what are some examples in a ministry context where we see this reality play out? Parts interrelating towards a goal. What might be some specific examples, Logan? Yeah?
How the pastors and elders and the worship leaders are orchestrating the church to be the foundation.
Yeah, and we'll certainly look at that today. What else? What are the ministry contexts that we see this?
Along with what Logan said, I think I remember parts of a Luke's sermon where he talked about the duties of the shepherds, the elders, and the pastor towards the congregation, if you will, and those of the congregation
Yes.
Back.
So true.
And for that to work to reach the goal of glorifying God, spreading the news of the gospel.
Yeah, so the interrelatability between leadership and congregation. Last Sunday, if you weren't there, Pastor Luke taught on some elements of a healthy church And that's certainly one of them. What else? What other ministry, in what other ministry contexts do we see this playing out potentially, besides governance? Anything else come to mind, Chris?
I was thinking of Sunday school came
Yeah.
to mind, just in terms of teachers towards the same goal
Yeah.
and committed to teaching and further.
Yeah. So not only parts within a sub-ministry interrelating in the midst of that ministry, but how about each sub-ministry interrelating with each other? Again, if our mission as a church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ, okay, as we often say at our coffee shop, hey, the barometer for whether or not we do something is not, is it a good idea? Because there's a lot of good ideas in the coffee world that we choose not to do. But does it accomplish the mission? And I think in the same thing in the ministry context, when we think about, to Chris's point, not only the within each sub-ministry, but how those ministries interrelate towards the same goal of what? Making disciples of Jesus Christ. And so we see this playing out in these ministry contexts, and certainly at the direction of the Lord, and we'll see other more governance type examples of that as we continue this morning. Okay? Opposite of order. Joe kind of already gave us the answer. She saw my notes. The opposite of order is chaos. Good. Gold star, Joe. I gave out, I think, prizes the first time I filled in. I don't have any prizes today. Yeah. Okay, so God is a God of order. Now, what would be the most major example, do you think, as you think about the Lord, you think about the scriptures, the work of God? What would be the most major example potentially? Go ahead, Heidi.
Maybe like someone taking something out of context, like taking a couple of words out and like pulling that out
Ooh.
and saying, this isn't in context. Like, it's not really in context, but they wanted it to say certain things.
Yes. A great example of disorder, right? Taking scriptures out of context, running off with a certain theology, and utilizing the scriptures. We probably see this often, right? Utilizing the scriptures in a way that it's not intended, or the meaning in a way that it's not intended. And that certainly can cause disorder, for sure. Go ahead, Joe.
I would say, for me, the biggest and the first was when God created order out of chaos in Genesis.
Yeah, yeah. MVP student today, Joe. Excellent. Let's take a look. Acts chapter 17, verse 24 says this: the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, I think is the most primary example we can see that the hand of God at work in an orderly fashion. In fact, this word world, we get the word, that the Greek word is cosmos, and it literally means ordered world. What are some other examples within creation and even within our everyday context where we see, order at the hand of the Lord? Seasons, yeah. What else?
Tides.
What is it? Tides, okay. What else? Government, okay. Hopefully, sometimes.
In the overall,
Yeah.
in the end run.
Yeah. How about math? Any math nerds in here? Right? Who came up with that? My goodness. My freshman year in college, I somehow placed into an honors calculus class. You take those placement tests, and I show up and like, oh, you're in honors calculus. I said, I don't even know what that is. And the first day of class, I'll never forget it. There were 200 people in the class. It was in this auditorium. Professor walks out. Wow, I'm really rabbit trailing here. Sorry, but this is funny. Professor walks out. He's probably 85 years old. This little guy, I'll never forget his name, is Mr. Bumby. I'm not making that up. He's on a microphone. He says, doesn't introduce himself, doesn't say anything. He just says, I don't care if you come to class. Just make sure you're here for the midterm and the final, because that's your only grades. And like 3/4 of the class walked out, including me, because I had no idea what was going on. I kind of self-taught, got a C. Don't ask me about calculus, but math, we certainly see that. What else? Go ahead.
Grammar?
Yeah, grammar, absolutely. Absolutely. Music? It's amazing how a lot of the early philosophers would study music as means to understanding logic. Logic would be another one, right? How about systems of morality? Absolute morality would be another example.
These are all forms of chaos too now.
In a fallen world and mishandled, yes, for sure.
The
There's
construction of the human body.
yes. I always find it interesting, folks who might push back on sort of the what they would describe as the over systematizing of things within the church. And I don't know. I just think we should not be so corporate, or we should not be so organizational, right? But man, just like to Logan's point, look at your own body. I mean, circulatory system, digestive system, right? Lymphatic system, everything structured and ordered. Good point, Logan. Okay, let's take a look at two aspects of God's creation relative to his ordering of it and his role in it, okay? Number one, very clearly we know from the scriptures that he made it, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What's amazing about this verse, and I think it's often been effectively said, if you can believe Genesis 1:1, the rest of the Bible is pretty easy to believe, right? But what do we see in this very first verse in the entirety of the scriptures? What we see, time being created, okay? This is when time itself was created. God exists, we know, outside of time, but he created time as a part of his creative act. So we see time. What else did we see? Space. God created the heavens. Pop quiz. What are the three different heavens that are talked about in the scriptures? First, second, and third, which represent anybody? What's the first one?
Atmosphere.
Up to the atmosphere, our sky. Second heaven? Space, beyond the atmosphere. Third heaven? God's dwelling place, yeah. So, time, space, and what else? Light, okay. Chris? Matter, yep. In fact, I referenced this recently in one of my sermons, and Caroline Unger came up after, and it was awesome. She's like, time, space, matter, but you missed two other ones. And she talked about God, meaning like action, divine action. I forget the fifth one, but it was pretty cool that she was interacting in that regard.
Sorry, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
This has been on my head for like a little while, and I don't know.
Uh-oh.
It's like the right time to ask, but I'm trying to think about when time was created, because if we don't have an ordered time for how, we don't know how long they were in the garden, is time as a human understanding of time a product of the fall, because that's when their lives were ordered and time is what orchestrates our own death?
Yeah.
When was that put into place?
Yeah. It's a great question. Wow.
I've never.
No, and there's so much to this. I actually had to write a paper last semester on the philosophy of time, which was intense. I'll send it to you. But I think at this moment, time was created. Now, what is time? I mean, we're really rabbit trailing here. I won't spend a lot of time on this. No, it's great. It's great. Time is understood as the measurement of change. Okay, the measurement of change. God doesn't change, so he dwells outside of that understanding. We dwell inside that understanding. We're constantly changing, right? So the question is, were Adam and Eve changing prior to their sin?
Yeah.
That's a question that we can grapple with another time.
You have the days of the week, right? Creation, so there's time is elapsing
Yep.
there. In
Yep.
Creation.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Good questions. Not only did God make it, but he also maintains it. You might remember last time I filled in on a Sunday, we talked about the 6 major worldviews, and one of them being deism, the belief that God created everything and then just steps out, kind of winds up the clock and then just lets it go. In fact, again, a lot of scholars believe our founding fathers weren't theists, but they were deists. But what do the scriptures say? The scriptures tell us that not only did he make it, but he maintains it. Colossians 1:17. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So not only did he create it, but he's active in the sustaining of it as well. Okay, and certainly this is probably the most prominent example of God being a God of order. Okay, what are some other examples? Well, let's consider these. One of them we talked about already, but think about the design of the tabernacle, just the ordered intricacies of that, and you can certainly explore Exodus to take a look at that. And then the structure of the sacrificial system, right? Also ordered, thoughtful, purposeful. Okay, parts interrelated towards a purpose. And then we unpacked certainly the order that we see in our own bodies. And think about when we're unhealthy, right? There's a disorder to the systems within our own body. So here's the thing. Here's sort of the idea or the point of all this. If God is a God of order, doesn't it stand to reason that he would want to order his most prized institution, which is what? The church. Second theological proposition. God has ordered one of his most precious institutions, which is the church. Now, we'll come back to Titus 1:5 later on in our time together, but for now, a quick glimpse at it. This is why I left you in Crete, this is Paul writing, so that you might put what remained into order. And that will be the crux of our time together, to unpack what is it exactly. How do the scriptures instruct us to order the church? Okay? Now, not only is God a God of order, but number two, second theological proposition for you fill in the blankers, God's church is a family of faith. And we're going to talk about that word family and why I've chosen that and why it's such an important understanding of what the church is. This isn't a fraternity. This isn't some club. This isn't just a gathering. Listen, if we're actually going to, as a local church, make disciples of Jesus Christ, it's so important that we recognize, that we realize, and that we buy into the fact that this church, it's a family. Okay? And so what does that look like? What is the foundational understanding of what that is? What are some of the characteristics of that? We're going to spend the next few minutes on that. Okay? So let's understand the progression. How do we get there? How do we get to this point where we as a church are a family of faith? Okay? So let's walk through a progression here. So when you receive Christ, when you profess your faith in Christ as sufficient for your salvation, right, you enter this familiar relationship. You are, the scriptures tell us, adopted. Okay? Take a look. Ephesians 2. For through him, we both have access in one spirit to the Father. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the what? Household of God. Okay? This is, you are adopted into a family. Paul certainly picks up on that important point and uses that word specifically in Romans 8. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. That word adoption in the Greek literally is two parts. It's a compound word meaning son, set as a son. And this isn't a metaphorical idea here. This is far beyond that. In the context of that time, especially in Roman law, the idea here is a legal transaction. Okay, adoption law in Roman times, and Paul's writing to the Romans here, is literally when you're adopted, you sever ties with your previous family. All debts are canceled, and you are an inheritor in your new family. And so it's a very powerful word that, we can appreciate in the English, but there's so much meat there in the original text. Set as a son is what that word literally means. Okay? So not only are we adopted when we come to Christ, but also that adoption, again, It means a familiar relationship. Again, you're not joining a club, you know. This isn't an in and out kind of thing. You are grafted in to a family. In fact, it's been wisely said, I think, there are two types of people in the world. Follow with me. There are people who are still a slave to the law because they haven't dealt with their sin problem, or there are children of God. So you're either a law slave or you're a child of God. And when we profess that, you know, Romans 10, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Okay? There's this, again, family, child of God type of relationship that begins at that point. You are adopted into that family. So not only are we adopted into this familiar relationship, but let's take a look at probably a prime example of where we see this, Jesus talking about this in the scriptures. And this is the Net translation. How many unfamiliar maybe with the Net Bible? I really encourage you guys to have one in your arsenal. The Net Bible, actually got one for Logan for Christmas. You enjoying it? It's awesome. So it's a study Bible, but the study notes have less to do.
What does net mean?
The New English translation. Yeah. The notes in the margins aren't commentary on the meaning, but commentary on the language, on the words, on the translation. And man, it is a rich tool. So I encourage you to, every once in a while, grab the translation from the Net Bible when I think it's probably capturing most the original. Go ahead, sir.
This is just a sidebar. I just heard yesterday that there's 67 translations of the Bible.
Is that what the number is now?
Yeah.
Wow.
More than one for every book of the Bible.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with Blue Letter Bible, probably everybody is, but what a great online tool to be kind of hopping back and forth between translations, and you can activate that Strong's button. Does anybody not know what I'm talking about when I say that? You have to be on the new, what we call NASB, the New American Standard Translation, or I think the King James, but you probably don't want to go there. But if you're on the New American Standard Translation in Blue Letter Bible, you click that Strong's checkbox, and what it does, Strong's is a resource that assigns numbers to every Greek word in the Bible. And so when you click that Strong's box on Blue Letter Bible, it will populate those numbers, every word in the text. You can click on that number, you get the Greek word, you actually get the pronunciation, you get the little play button, and it'll be a guy talking on how to say it, and then it'll show you the roots, it'll show you what kind of word it is, it'll show you all the other examples and times where that word has been used. What a great resource if you're not familiar with it. Yeah, it's so much, and there's commentary in there. There's some effective commentaries in there. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry, what was that?
BlueLetterBible.org. Yeah.
And there's an app.
Is there an app?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on that every day. It's definitely the go-to. Okay, Net Bible, Jesus speaking. While Jesus was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and brothers came and stood outside asking to speak to him. Someone told him, "Look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." To the one who had said this, Jesus replied, "Who's my mother and who are my brothers?" And pointing to his disciples, which would be you if he was in the room, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." You guys are children of God and in the family of faith. Okay, not only do we see adoption as a result of our salvation, and that adoption resulting in a familial relationship, this family is known as the church, okay? And then that church, again, our proposition this morning is that church is an ordered institution, okay? In fact, it's no surprise, and I don't know if he did it on purpose, but does anybody remember the very first semester, the topic that Pastor Luke chose? Theology of family. I don't know if he planned it that way. He probably did, knowing him. The fact that we started there and then now we're going into ecclesiology is beautiful, and it really sets the foundation for an understanding of the local church and the church, Big C church. Okay? Take a look at the next text from Paul in 1 Timothy 3. It says this, "These things I write to you, though I hope to come to you shortly. But if I'm delayed, I write so that you may know how you ought to conduct yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth." So again, we're going to be unpacking God is a God of order. This is a family of faith. How are we to function and operate and execute towards, again, that common goal of making disciples? Okay, so we talked about God being a God of order. We talked about the importance of understanding that this is a household. And then the third section here will be the church as. What are the instructions? What are the marching orders from the Lord with regard to executing church? Okay, with that, let's take a break. 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. Okay, guys, we'll come back together. So far we've talked about God being a God of order, the church being a family of faith. Before we go into the church as, which is sort of the third part of the title that I've extracted out to serve as our outline, any questions to this point about order, about household? Guys have had good input, good interaction. Okay, next theological proposition. Jesus Christ is the head of the church, not Peter. If that offends you, I'm happy to discuss it, but
I get it. Just sunk in.
Jesus Christ is the head of the church. Listen, one quick comment on this, and I'm not trying to be funny, right? From where does the Catholic Church get that understanding that Peter's right? Go ahead. Yep. Now, how can we? Yes, 100%. How do we look at that text and understand whether or not Jesus was talking about Peter being the foundation of the church, or what's the Protestant understanding of that?
The statement of faith.
That faith is the foundation of the church. How can we discern which is which? Has anybody explored that before, or have an understanding of how we can see what I think is the distinction that Jesus is talking about? Upon this faith, I'll build my church.
I'm not sure if this is what you're getting at, but there was two different rocks.
Yep.
Peter was the smaller of the two.
Yep. Jesus says, "And you are Peter, Petros," which means small rock or stone, or pebble. "And upon this rock," not Petros, Petra, large rock, boulder, "I will build my church." Okay, and so I think the evidence in the language there is that Jesus was talking about building his church upon faith. Go ahead, Joe.
I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic school, grammar, high school, and even college was a Catholic college. And so,
Sure.
inundated with the Peter
Sure.
was the first apostle and so forth. The way
And listen, he had a leadership role. He's a preeminent apostle, no question. I'm not. Yeah, go ahead.
When I got saved, basically, and I started getting into the Bible, the way I understood it was that Jesus was saying, "Upon this testimony of yours."
Of faith, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and you see that in the language. In fact, every single time that Petros is used in the New Testament, 156 times, if you want to put that in your back pocket for Jeopardy one day, it's always referencing Peter by name, okay? Whereas Petra is used besides that, okay? Side note, Jesus Christ is the head of the church. We saw in Colossians 1 evidence for the fact that God is active in his creation. We also see the next verse, Paul writes this, "And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent." Okay? So the Lord presides over his ordered household. And then as a result, next theological proposition, we receive our orders, kind of a play on words there, I capitalized order. We receive our orders from the King. And so we want to be organizing church, executing church, doing church in a way that is prescriptive from the Lord. Okay? And we'll unpack that for our final hour together. Okay? Now, sticking with this analogy of the body, if Jesus is the head, what about the rest of the body? How are we to organize? How are we to structure ourselves? What do the scriptures tell us? What's the prescription from God's word? Well, we're going to take a look at three main categories as we continue. Elders, deacons. I might take a position on deacons that is different than what you've heard before. That's okay. Elders, deacons, and congregation. Okay, so that's going to be the framework by which we understand that how the church has been ordered, how this household has been ordered. Let's start by going back to Titus. I referenced it earlier. Titus chapter 1, verse 5. Paul writes, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." Okay. Another example of this idea of appointing elders, Acts chapter 14. "And when they had appointed elders for them in every church, with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had believed." Okay, so let's talk about some terminology here. And certainly Pastor Luke has taught on this in the past, even from the pulpit, but let's review that a little bit. In today's context, we hear words like elder, pastor, overseer, bishop, not so much in our context, but certainly I'm sure you've been exposed to that term at some point, and shepherd. Okay, all of these words that sort of get used semi-interchangeably. What is this? What's that? Is that a title? Is that a position? Is that a charge? Is that a verb? Is that a noun? We want to spend a few moments unpacking that so that we can really understand what the scriptures are teaching relative to ordering ourselves. Okay? So we're going to look at one verse that I think captures just about all of these words in one verse and gives us a really clear summary understanding of them all. 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. "The elders who are among you, I exhort. I am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock." Well, now, what will be your guess? Verb or noun? Yeah, shepherd the flock, which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly. Okay, so let's take a look at these three words: elder, shepherd, overseer. Let's go back to the original language. Let's let the Bible teach the Bible, and I think you will have a better understanding of what each of these words mean and what their purpose is. Okay, the word elder in the Greek is the word presbyteros. Okay, and it's largely a title. In fact, I can't think of an example where it's not a title. Then we see the word overseer or bishop. Those two words, overseer, bishop, same word in the Greek, and it's the word episkopos. By the way, what two words are you starting to see? Presbyterian, Episcopalian, right? Okay. So if you see overseer or bishop in the scriptures, it's the same word. Sometimes used as a title, sometimes used as an instruction, a verb, an action, okay, to oversee something, or to be an overseer, okay? And then finally, the word pastor or shepherd, okay, is the word poimeno in the Greek, almost exclusively, not exclusively, but more predominantly used as a verb, okay, as an action, to shepherd or to pastor, okay? And so when we look at those three words, we look at their use in the scriptures. I think the next sort of chart, if you will, really gives us a summary understanding of these three words and the point of them, okay? So when we talk about elders, okay, we're really talking about a position, who the person is. Then when we talk about an overseer, Okay, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of that particular person? Okay, they're overseeing something. And then when we see the word shepherd or pastor, I think really the predominant example of the word pastor in the scriptures used as a noun or a title. Can anybody maybe remember where that is? I know Chris Acton knows. And he gave some to be pastors and teachers, right, for the edifying of the church, Ephesians chapter 4. Probably the main example where that's a noun, but it is predominantly a verb. So it's how we oversee, how we elder, if you will. Okay, position, purpose, and posture. But when we're talking about an understanding of ordering ourselves as a church, the idea here is that these are pretty interchangeable. When you're talking about an elder, an overseer, a shepherd, the idea is one concept, one office, one sort of charge, okay, to the leadership. Now, in today's context, oftentimes you see these two words, right? Elder, pastor, which is which? Are they the same? Are they different? Is the idea of someone being a pastor higher than elder, lower, interchange? I'll tell you what I love about this church is, boy, do they get church governance right. And it's pretty rare, I'll be honest with you. I've been on staff at other churches. I've, I geek out on church constitutions and bylaws because that's, church administration studies. It's pretty rare where I read a set of bylaws or how a church is structuring themselves. Wow, this is just so scriptural. Okay, and we'll talk about why I think that's the case in our context today and why we see churches kind of go awry in that area. But when we talk about elders and pastors in today's context, really I think the most helpful understanding that we can have, they are the same position, the same charge, the same set of qualifications that in today's context, we simply will use the word pastor to describe a vocational elder. Okay, and then we'll use the word elder to describe, I hate to use the word volunteer, but a lay elder, a non-compensated, elder kind of thing. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Any pushback? Feel free. Okay. Same responsibility, same position in the scriptures. And in today's modern, Pastor Luke would be the first to tell you, hey, I'm the pastor of this church. I'm one of the elders. They're one and the same kind of thing. In fact, this book right here, well, both of these books, but this book in particular does a really good job of unpacking that understanding.
You would say that the pastor would come from that group of elders.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Again, in the scriptures, you don't see a distinction between pastoring and eldering. Yeah, interchangeable, same position, same understanding. Now, let's talk about sort of two errant extremes that we see in the church today. Pendulums swing in either direction that tends to become not only problematic, but I would even argue unscriptural. Okay? Number one, clericalism, this idea that there's this ruling authority from on high, right? And maybe you've been in a church context where you've sort of, seen that, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. And I just don't think you see that in the scriptures. I think the evidence in the scriptures is that elders are in the mud pits with you guys, that we're all doing this together. Has anybody seen Band of Brothers? I don't know why this just came to mind. Band of Brothers, the mini-series about the World War II. Yeah, and if you haven't, man, it's top notch. But, it just came to mind that, the guys that were most respected in those units were, even though they were in leadership, they were on the front lines with their guys, tackling the task in hand. And again, if we're an ordered set of parts working towards the same mission, man, our leaders better be in the mud pits with the team. And I think one of the pendulum swings away from that is this idea. The other one, in the other direction, congregationalism. Okay? Sometimes I feel like I have a lot to say on congregationalism. It's probably a conversation for another time, but one of the most common mistakes that I believe churches make in the United States is congregational rule. Now, that might seem a little authoritative of a statement, but we just don't see it in the scriptures. I think what has happened is sort of American colonial democracy has invaded the church. And this goes back, this isn't, a relatively new thing. But there was almost this marriage between, church and democracy, if you will. I mean, I've been in churches where if you come to Christ, you wait 6 months, you're now a voting member of the church, and, you're voting to fire people. I mean, it's wild. And so I think, this idea of congregationalism, I just don't think it's modeled in the scriptures. And I do think it's a pendulum swing in the wrong direction, and really is abdicating, it's the leadership abdicating their responsibility as leaders. Go ahead.
Well, I was saved
Great.
in a church like that.
Okay. Very common.
I saw the problems firsthand.
Yeah. I mean, we could all rattle off, we won't, but we'll all rattle off examples of specific churches where we've seen just the fallout of this. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, obviously it was anti the structure of the church at that time, the Roman Catholic Church especially,
Yeah.
and Church of England is what started that off. But
Yeah.
it reminds me of, we all talk in the United States and outside the United States about being a democracy.
Yes.
But we're not.
We're not.
We're a republic, and that's not that's not political.
Yep.
But we vote for representatives
That's right.
that do our governing. If it was truly a democracy, everybody would be voting
On everything.
on everything. Yes, which is mind-boggling.
Whew. Yeah.
It's
Good example.
similar thought, and a lot of these thoughts came as a rebellion against secular kings and that establishment, and
So true.
popes and that establishment.
Listen, this is all pendulum swings, right? And in fact, I was having a conversation with a young man from our church just Sunday after service. Went over to How You Brewing, our coffee shop. This gentleman was in there, and he calls me over and he says, "Hey, I'm contemplating becoming an Orthodox." And I kind of chuckled because we're seeing this in this generation, in these guys' generation, this sort of longing for high liturgy and for reverence. Why? Because it's a pendulum swing from what we've seen for the past 20, 30 years, which was more what? Seeker sensitive, Willow Creek, Elevation, these churches that, lights, smoke machines, all this kind of things to attract the unchurched. And I get it. I get the heart behind it. And now all of a sudden, this generation's saying, that's all pretty disingenuous to me. I just want the truth. But what I think we're seeing is this overswing into sort of high liturgy, orthodox, ornate. In fact, this young man asked me, "Hey, is it okay if I wear an Orthodox cross?" And it's like, well, talk to me about why you want to do that. And what I heard was this heart of just reverence for the Lord. So, all of these, to your point, Joe, are just pendulum swings. And hopefully it finds its center and its middle. But go ahead. And then I'll come to you, Jim.
I'm sorry?
I thought you had another.
Yeah. As far as it being a pendulum swing, as far as congregationalism, that started hundreds of
Yes.
years ago.
No question.
At the Protestant Reformation. And then if it's swinging back, would you think that going towards a more defined organization with someone at the head and so forth and so on is at this time, at the end times, a lead into a one world church and the Antichrist, because congregationalism is almost the opposite of what the Antichrist will do, among other things, is to have he's the head of the
and that'll certainly be the overswing back in that other direction. Our goal as a Bible teaching church is to find that sort of plumb line middle of what do the scriptures teach. And I would argue emphatically that the scriptures do not teach congregationalism, but they also don't teach clericalism. Andy Stanley says this: anything with more than one head is a freak. Right? I think there's a lot of truth to that. Go ahead, Jim.
My question is, in a healthy church, what are considered matters that would be brought before a congregation for vote as
Yeah.
opposed to the leadership deciding
Yeah.
certain things?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I think a lot of this does require some just, practical wisdom. I don't think I can't think of a singular time in the scriptures, someone correct me if they can recall one, where a vote was taken. Here at Island Bible Church, there are two things that we have our members retain in terms of voting responsibility, and that is to buy and sell property or change the bylaws.
How about budget approval?
No. Yeah. Buy and sell property, because we as a leadership team don't want to make that decision on our own to take on debt and to do those kinds of things, or to change the rules. And I just think that I think our bylaws as IBC has presented them and changed them just last January are the most scriptural bylaws that I've ever seen. So.
IBC is an independent church. It's
Yes.
not part of any denomination.
Correct. Yeah. Other comments? Think about one final point on congregationalism, and I want to talk a moment to the husbands and fathers of this room, right? When you think about every husband and father in this room is the senior pastor of their family, right? And when you think about that role and the weightiness of that role, and when we abdicate that and sort of decentralize that in the family unit, what happens? Chaos, disorder. Same idea in the church. Same idea. Okay. So let's start to move into, one final comment on, and you guys looked at this, you men, I believe, at the breakfast this morning, right? This was kind of the presiding verse of the morning, if I'm not mistaken. Hebrews 13, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls, as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning. Why? For that would be no advantage to you. Okay? You see, a submission to church leadership, it's God's ordered design for our church as a benefit to you, not as and again, we've seen this in churches where when that gets lorded over the people, that's not biblical. That's not Jesus's example. We're alongside you, shepherd. It's often been said, you can pull, you can push, or you can come alongside, right? And the idea there is that your leaders are alongside you in the mud pits with you. Again, parts ordered towards the same goal. Okay? So if Jesus Christ is the head of the church, what parts of the body are the elders? Thoughts before I give my thoughts? Let's stay with the body analogy for a minute.
The hands and feet.
Okay. Chris?
Just below the head, so there's some parts in the.
Neck, maybe, Mike?
Say, additional teachers, Sunday school teachers,
Yeah.
youth pastors, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would think part of elders, because they're told to they're apt to teach.
Yeah. And by the way, I would argue that anybody that's going to carry the title pastor, this is important, maybe it's controversial, needs to meet all of the requirements in 1 Timothy with regarding to elders. Okay. And we see examples of that. Again, we're not going to pick on churches here necessarily, but oftentimes if I'm on a website and I see, staff and it's, pastor, I'm like, that kind of thing. So pastors are elders. Go ahead, Mike.
You're making, and I wanted to ask this earlier, you're making a distinguishing between the preacher and pastor. You're actually, like your elder is your pastor, preacher,
Yeah.
preacher, elder. Are you distinguishing the preacher from the pastor?
I think teaching pastor is one of the ways in which elders are called to shepherd the church. I think it's clear that in the scriptures that to be an elder, you need to be able to teach the scriptures, to divide the text. And so I think all elders should have some ability to teach. But yes, I think it's wholly appropriate for a church to choose a primary communicator of the scriptures, a primary teacher. And in fact, recently as elders, we sort of tweaked the language that we're using to describe Pastor Luke's position from senior pastor to lead pastor. I think that there's a more important connotation there. So I think we do see examples in the scriptures of what we call the first among equals, which we'd have to sit here and think about that term for a while. First among equals. Luke is one of and primary of. And again, I think, back to our Peter conversation, there's some evidence for Peter being in that seat as well. So I don't know if I answered that question, but yeah.
And so then
Lead communicator, first among equals would be our lead pastor, for sure.
if God is the head, then you guys are the heart.
Okay, I'm gonna. These are the three I came up with. Elders are our eyes, and again, we want the Bible to be teaching us. The scriptures. We want all of our answers to come from God's word. So I would argue that the elders are eyes watching over. Here's Paul's words to the Ephesian church in Acts 20. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Therefore, be alert, be watchful. Okay? If you aspire to be an elder in your church, by the way, aspiration is the first qualification listed. I so appreciate Pastor Luke when he says, our job isn't to quote unquote recruit elders. It is to assess the gifting of those that communicate a desire to serve in that position. That is biblical, man. Okay, so elders are eyes, also mouth, back to what Mike was saying. 2 Timothy 4, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season, reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching. So elders are eyes, their mouth, and finally I would argue their ears. Listening for what? Well, 2 Timothy 4, for the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. And we could go around the room and list names that fall into that category. We won't. But I would argue that the elders in any local congregation are our eyes, our ears, and our mouth. Okay? Now, when we think about elders sort of as a sort of summary category, how do I believe that they are best described? I think the most powerful word that I've heard, or the most powerful characterization that I've heard relative to what elders in a church are called to do, is the idea that they're protectors. Okay? And let's look at that for a minute and why I say that. Paul writes this in 1 Timothy 5, let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially those, here's to Mike's point, who labor in the word and doctrine. Okay? Double honor. Now, that phrase rule well might give a connotation of what? Yeah, lording over, large and in charge, sort of this hierarchy. But when we look at the original language, proistemi means to guard and to protect. It's not a ruling over, even though the English sort of gives that connotation. Again, blue letter Bible, guys, this is where you see these things. And the Bible starts to come to life even more as you're like, oh, wait, that word means that? And we see it used here. You get a rich understanding of the scriptures. Go ahead. Sorry.
I remember seeing a quote from John Calvin that said something like, pastor ought to have two voices, one for calling the sheep and one for warning against the wolf.
Ooh, yeah. That's great. Thank you for that.
Called like watchmen on the wall. Some pastors will say like, I'm a watchman for your souls.
Love that.
Yeah.
Protector, right? Primary role of an elder is to protect, not to lord over. Protect. Go ahead, Chris.
Let's say a lot of times we do see a negative connotation when we see rule or governing. Yeah. But at the same time, we think about it in terms, this came up in our conversation, even within a family, the security that your kids have is based on the confines, or I'll say the structure and the boundaries that we set as parents. which helps them to understand it, not to take on more than they can handle
Yeah.
at their age, and to know that they're being protected, and there's a healthy aspect to that.
Yeah, it's so solid. I mean, when you draw these concepts back to the idea of family structure, I think it does, to your point, really reveal the value of, what the exhortation is and what the role is. I mean, even think about police officers, right? I mean, I was a police officer for 7 years. We've met cops who understand that their role is to protect, and they approach their job a certain way. And then we have met cops that sort of approach their role more as a ruler, and they approach their job a very different way. And I think whether it's cops or elders, those that understand that the duty is to protect, not to lord over, is far more true to the scriptures. Okay? Don Cousins, I referenced his book a couple times. This is his summary understanding of elders as protectors. What are they protecting? Well, there's a protection from false teaching, from sin, through prayer. I mean, Pastor Luke talked about this last Sunday. The most important thing we can do as elders for this body is to pray for you guys. And then protecting the mission to make the disciples, keeping us on mission, keeping us from being distracted by other things. Again, back to my sort of coffee analogy. How come you guys don't do this at your coffee shop? It's a great idea, but it would distract us from our mission. We've identified a mission at our coffee brand, and we're going to stay true to that. Same thing in the church, and all the more important, by the way. And what you guys wouldn't know this, but very recently, we have changed completely how our elders meetings happen, what we do at those. They used to be pretty businessy when I first started, and there's been a very clear and deliberate pivot away from the business side for the elders, and I'll explain later where that got delegated to, and I think it's more scriptural. But our elders meetings now, 3 things we cover: direction, discipline, and Pastor Luke's gonna kill me. What's the third one? Direction, discipline.
Gotta be a D.
It is a D. You know it well. Oh man. Doctrine. Thank you. Who said that? All right, you and Joe, you both are MVPs today. And honestly, that's our meetings now. They're completely different. They're far more, I think, adherent to the scriptures, and we're all excited about that. So, elders as protectors. Yes.
What do you mean discipline? When you say that's what you deal with? What are you talking about?
One of the things that I think elders are called to do is protect the church from sin, right? So, I mean, disciplining our church is a very real element of being an elder. And obviously the how of that is critical. But think about in Matthew 18 when Jesus walks through a process by which we deal with offense, right? One-on-one, one-on-two, bring in the elders, bring it to the church. And if that particular portion of scripture is foreign to you, check it out. There's a clear 4-part step that Jesus lays out to deal with conflict and offense. And so I think so many churches abdicate that role of addressing offense and habitual sin in people's lives. And again, it's not this, it's this. I love you enough to tell you the truth. And we see that you're struggling in this area. Let's minister to you. Does that answer your question, Craig?
My question, and in order to be able to protect, as an elder, you have to know the flock, right?
Yes.
You have to know them.
Yes.
So is part of the responsibility of an elder at our church for let's say there's 4. Mm-hmm. You take this group and get to know them.
Yes.
Is that what you actually do to get to know? Are you assigned, for lack of a better word, these group of people?
It's such a great question. And I think it's a needed step, and I think we're headed in that direction. I think the first step was to change how we're approaching eldering. Again, moving out of this sort of corporate business understanding of that position in the church, and more of a spiritual shepherding position. And I think the next step is the very thing you're describing.
Well, we're kind of headed that way. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
That way already with the life groups, where you have life groups that are primarily run by elders, and others, and you get a chance to interact with them at that level, which would give you indication of where they are and where they're going.
That's right. And different churches approach it differently. A lot of these things do happen through a small group ministry approach. Other churches will divide it up as you described, Craig, whether it's alphabetically, whatever it might be, or fantasy draft. I'm kidding, but you know what I mean? Like, I know him, I'll take him. I know her, that kind of thing. I'm just kidding. But yeah, you don't want to trade? No. But no, to your point, critical step and something that we're working on. For now, yes, the approach has been that small group ministry is the primary means by which that happens. Not everybody's in a small group. Yeah. Good point. Love that. One final analogy on this idea of elders as protectors. This is a little bit more comical. Andy Stanley came up with this book called Guardrails. He described elders as guardrails. When you think about a guardrail, what do you think about? Well, he says this: elders are gray. They're not necessarily attractive, but man, you're sure glad they're there when you need them. Right. And so I always thought that was helpful and funny. Now, again, this role of elder isn't limited to a paid position. These aren't just pastors, okay? And in fact, oftentimes churches, when they don't understand the role of elders, and I mean, I've been in churches where the pastors are so overloaded with just the weight of the work because elders are viewing their positions as corporate roles. Like, wow, you're an elder because you're a CFO. You're an elder because you're an accountant. Like, no. That's not the idea. So when we talk about the role of vocational elders or pastors, okay, I want everybody to sort of know and digest this understanding. D.L. Moody said this: a pastor doesn't do the work of 10 people. All right, Logan and Peyton might feel like they do sometimes, but rather raises up 10 people to do the work. Okay, and if there's one thing that I want you guys to leave today with, is starting to contemplate, if you don't know the answer already, is not only why does God have me here at Island Bible Church, but what's my place in it? What is he calling me to do? And we'll unpack that when we get to the congregation section. But this is such a critical point to understand that, the pastor will take care of that. The staff will take care of that. No. We are failing as an elder team, and the staff is failing if they're trying to do the opposite of this. What do you see when that happens? Chaos, burnout. Like, let's protect our pastors by making sure that we understand this concept.
That's highlighted in the membership book.
And listen, I've been part of churches where the pastors want to try to do all of that. Yeah. And what that churches like that are doing is robbing the congregation of the joy, the privilege, the blessing of serving, of discovering, the reasons why God has gifted you. And we'll talk about this shortly. But not only do we want to protect our pastors, but let's insist that they're allowing us to be deployed in the way in which God has called us to be deployed. Okay? So when we think about the role of pastors in particular, pastors, elders, I want to talk about a two-part understanding of their role. Not to do the work of 10 men, but number one, a ministry of equipping. Okay? One of the two primary purposes of the elder pastor of a church is to equip. Ephesians 4. And he gave some to be apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers. It's the one example where poimeno is used as a noun, okay, for the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry, right? Not that they're doing the work of 10 men, but they're equipping others to do it for the building up of the body of Christ. One of the primary functions of a pastor elder is to equip the body. Go ahead, Jim.
If you're familiar with John MacArthur, that's one point he always emphasized in his ministry, equipping the saints to do the work.
Amen.
The pastors are there on the sidelines, kind of like encouraging and developing and equipping.
Yep. One of the marks of a healthy church is that this is happening. Okay? And we'll look at it side by side in just a moment of unhealthy, healthy model that points back to this. Not only are pastor elders called to primarily be equipping, they're also called to be multiplying. Okay? Paul, once again, in these things you have heard me say, in the presence of many witnesses, entrust it to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. Right? Multiply yourself as an elder, leader, pastor. You think about the exponential reach that this church can have when we do that, versus again everything getting loaded on to the elder only, pastor only. I mean, I joke with Luke all the time, like, can I rent those extra few hours of the day that you seem to have that I don't have? I mean, what he's able to accomplish in the same 24 hours is amazing. But we want to protect him. We want to honor him. And the best way we can do that is to insist that he's multiplying himself, and so that he has longevity in his calling. Okay. All right. That was a lot on elders. Let's pivot to deacons. Okay. What about deacons? In fact, in January, when we presented the new bylaws and deacons were conspicuously removed and absent from the document, I think someone asked a question about it. Maybe someone in this room. It was a good question. Did you ask, Greg? Hey, what about deacons? And, I want to talk a little bit about that. So who are they? What's the purpose of deacons? And is it a position in an office? Okay. And much like poimen as a verb more than a noun, I think what we'll discover is the word for deacon in the scriptures is far more a verb and an action word than a noun and an office, and we'll talk about that. Okay. So again, let's let God's word guide us. We're not going to look at all of these, but you might want to snap a picture of this if you want to scope it out later. Examples where we see the word deacon used as a noun, okay? But every time it's translated servant in those examples, okay? Servant. And then diakoneo, the verb form, to serve, to minister. In fact, why don't we do this? Can I call on someone to read? Heidi, would you pick one of those four from this list? Pick any one. Tell me which one you're reading.
Sure, Matthew 20:26.
All right. And just tell us the translation so everybody knows.
Yep, so we're ESV.
ESV, okay.
Matthew 20:26. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant.
Okay. Same word, from which we get the word deacon. But overwhelming majority of the time, the same word that we translate as deacon. And by the way, we will get to the verse where we see the actual title deacon, but predominantly it's the word servant. Okay. Anybody? Want to Lori? Which one? No, pick one from this list. That's okay.
Matthew 4:11.
Okay. Are you using Blue Letter Bible? Look at this.
Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and began to serve him.
Okay. Same word, verb. So what's the connotation here? Service, servant, serving, right? Now, the question is, oftentimes in a church context, is that also an office? Okay? Is the idea of a deacon an office? Now, let me say, sort of as a summary statement, that in the New Testament, we see elders appointed. Churches are getting planted. The missionaries are doing their job. They're planting churches. They're setting up, their structure, their system, and they're moving on. And we see elders appointed. But there aren't times where it's appoint elders and deacons. Appoint elders and deacons. Yes, there is the example of, the purpose of deacons is to make sure that the elders can focus on preaching and teaching. And so let's bring in deacons. But again, the idea there is a connotation of service and servanthood. So here's the one place, though, that we will see it as a title. Okay, Philippians 1:1. Paul starts his letter, Paul and Timothy, servants of Christ, to all the saints who are at Philippi, with the overseers. Does anybody remember what that word was? Greek word? Pop quiz. Episkopos. Okay. Episkopos and diakonos. Diakon. I don't know. Lori could hit the play button for me on that word. I'm kidding. No, you don't have to do that. This is the one place where we see reference to the title. Okay. But I think the overarching message of the scriptures is this, and this is going to be sort of my premise for your consideration, is that the idea of being a deacon is a call to all of us, okay? That you are either an elder of your church or a deacon of your church. And then everyone here who is a follower of Jesus Christ, okay, has been given a gift to be deployed in the context of the church and beyond, and is called to be a deacon, a servant. Okay, this isn't we have those elders over here, we have deacons over here, and I'm just a congregant. I think this is a broader call. 1 Peter 4, as each has received a gift, use it to, that's the word for deacon, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied, interesting grace. Okay? God has called and gifted and impassioned each of you uniquely to serve in the context of your local church. Okay, so why did we remove it? Because of this. We didn't want there to be a sense and a feeling that that's an office, that's for a certain group of people, and it doesn't apply to me. Okay. So let's start to bring. Oh, sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
In Acts 6, when they chose that 7, were those considered deacons?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
At that point, as if it was a title in that case.
And I'd have to, maybe Lori can go to Acts 6 and hit the Strong's button to see which version of the word that is.
I don't see an actual word being used.
It's Acts 6, 1-7, right?
Yeah.
Can you read that out loud for us, Chris?
In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and we'll give our attention to prayer and to the ministry of the word. So then they mentioned who they chose.
Yeah. So I'd have to dig to find where the words are there, but that's where the concept of this sort of support team, letting the apostles, elders focus on the ministry of the word, and have all of this administrative, by the way, orderly type approach to ministry be handled by this other group. And again, I would argue that's everybody else. Okay. I think that this verse really clearly captures that. Okay. So let's talk about church as an ordered household, and sort of we've referenced this a little bit. 2 different examples, 2 different models that we see in the scriptures, and what I'm going to argue is an unhealthy model and then the biblical model. Okay. Institutional model, which for whole host of reasons, much like what Joe talked about, the influences of colonialism and England and all these other things that have sort of injected itself into the church, maybe even corporate structure and all that sort of organizational management strategy. This is what I would argue is a common, though unhealthy, approach to ordering this household. That a church considers itself elder-led, staff-run, and what happens? The congregation is served. I'm here as a consumer. I'm here to digest. Wow, that message was so good. By the way, nothing wrong with saying that. I say it all the time. But, drinking deeply and then just, all right, see you next time. That kind of thing. Congregation served, and then what happens? The community gets ignored. Very common, very unhealthy.
What community?
Outside our church.
Like where you're placed, you're not serving the community.
Yeah.
But even inside the church, the community in this is not generally served.
Right. They're ignored.
Right. They're
Yeah.
not discipled.
Yeah. So if the congregation sees themselves as consumers, the community will certainly be ignored. And if the congregation sees themselves as, oh, that's the staff's job, the community is going to be ignored. Okay? What's the biblical model? Elder protected, staff led. By the way, this is another very deliberate pivot that just happened at IBC amongst the leadership, is a moving away from an understanding that this is an elder-led church. Okay, there's some semantics here, but there's been a notable move away from that language, and an understanding that the staff leads the day-to-day, and the elder's job is to spiritually protect this congregation. Okay. And it's just really been a beautiful transition. So elder protected, staff led, congregation serving, right? Ministry of multiplication, ministry of equipping. Let's get to know people well enough to help them, to shepherd them and help them discover what's their place in this body. And then what's the result? The community is served. Go ahead, Joe.
With respect to IBC, what is staff-led? Who's considered staff?
Yeah. Right now, Pastor Luke, Pastor John, Dave Jones is our worship leader, Allie Nagel as our children's ministry leader.
Okay.
Yeah. More to come this year. If you were at the budget meeting, you know that we're going to be, as a church, exploring new and expanded staff this year. Go ahead, Chris. And then Jim.
Mentioned again at breakfast that that Pastor Luke does a great job of exhorting after each section is teaching to get us involved as a congregation to serve or to do what's being taught, not just to hear it.
Every time he asks me to fill in with him, he says this: make sure, and he never tells me what to teach. He's like, do your thing, but make sure the congregation leaves knowing the answer to the question, so what? And that has driven me every time, because I can just stand up and give, I can tend to be maybe a little heady and a little just sort of academic, but so what? Love that. Go ahead, Jim.
Isn't there overlap then between the elders and the staff like at IBC?
For sure. Yep. Yeah, pastors are elders. I would say in our context, all pastors are elders, not all elders are pastors. And again, making the distinction that that just means they're not compensated. Yeah. This is honestly the first church that I've been a part of leadership at where there is an understanding of the interchangeability between elder and pastor, and it is so biblical. And a lot of these contexts, it's like elders over pastors or pastors over elders. I was on staff at a previous church where at one point I said in an elders meeting, and by the way, the pastors were non-voting elders. Even the idea of voting in an elders meeting is, but I remember asking the question, hey, elders, do you guys think we work for you? Show of hands, please. And they all raised their hand. I thought, whoa. So, yeah. Healthy model. Elder protected, staff led. Questions?
Do you think the biblical model is more difficult in a large church, like a megachurch?
Great question.
We touched a little bit on megachurch versus like smaller churches.
Yeah.
Because my experience is in the larger churches, the institutional model seems to be just what's done. It's
a great question. Now, full disclosure, most of my ministry contacts are from very large churches. I interned at a church of about 4,000, and then I was on staff at a church in Fort Lauderdale, 30,000. That's pretty big. That's quite an operation. We had 800 people on staff. I will say, personally, I've seen very large church done very, very well. And I think it's less about what size is right and what size is wrong, and is the how being done correctly. And so I think where mega churches fail is in the how, not in the what per se. Like, wow, you're too big, you should split up. In fact, our church in Fort Lauderdale, there were many attempts to sort of decentralize, let's go start all these campuses. And people just, they didn't leave. They were, kind of thing. And much of those campuses are now no more. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Julie, but yeah, I think it's more about the how. And listen, maybe I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. I think there's very much a place for organizational management principles in the church, right? God is a God of order. If something is true, it's because God created it to be true. So whether it's math or a scripture or an organizational principle, if it's true, it's from the Lord and we should use it. I find myself often saying, even in our elders meetings, like, I know I'm about to use a corporate, like a business word, because, we work in a business context, and Pastor Luke's like, stop apologizing for that. If it's true, it's true. And so, but where I do think sometimes mega churches will fail is they just don't do this well.
How many elders in a 40,000 member church?
Yeah. Oh gosh. 30. We probably had 40. Now they did have deacons, hundreds, and pastors, 25. In fact, they had one pastor whose sole job was to be the pastor of the staff, because there were 800 people on staff. His congregation was 800, and they just happened to all be on staff.
Was it hard to find men to teach in United Theology?
Say again?
Was it hard to find men to teach in United Theology? To have the same doctrine?
Great question. I would say no, because this church, if you're familiar with the Calvary Chapel movement, it was a Calvary Chapel. So you're talking about an association of churches worldwide that had a like-minded theology. So if you're on staff at a Calvary, you knew what that meant. You knew what you were sort of, for lack of a better term, signing up for. So it wasn't a denomination. Calvary would be very quick to say, hey, we're not a denomination, we're an association. But there's agreed upon like-mindedness there. Chris comes from the Calvary world. Go ahead, Chris. You were gonna...
Say they have published distinctives.
Yes.
Chose to use it.
Yep. You can read a little book. It's called Calvary Chapel Distinctives, and then of course, all the staff was very familiar with the content of that. So, good question, though. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Okay. Okay. Final theological proposition. This is now we're going to wrap it up with. We've talked about elders. We've talked about deacons. I've sort of made the assertion that if you're not an elder, you're a deacon here. So long as you meet the... By the way, why would the qualifications of deacon exist if Dan's asserting that's for everybody? What do you think? I'm making the argument that that's everybody.
Ask the question again.
I'm making the argument that everyone is a deacon unless they're an elder. But we see in the pastoral epistles a clearly delineated list of qualifications for deacon. Why do you think that's the case?
That was going to be my question.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that that's just a really solid biblical prescription for how we should all interrelate because what's the one main omission? If you were to take the elder qualifications and the deacon qualifications and listed them side by side, there's really only one main distinction between the two.
Teaching.
Yeah, the ability to teach. So, which not everybody has that gift. That's okay. And that's the idea of Acts 6. Let the teachers teach and let the deacons take care of the day-to-day.
Divided up into two groups. There's active and potential. Right?
I like that.
That's good.
Go ahead, Peyton.
You say another distinction would be that elders are only to be men?
Yes, thank you.
And deacons can be women?
Can absolutely be women. Yep. Good. Thank you for reminding me of that. That's important. And I think you're making my argument that that's for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Good. Final theological proposition. We've talked about elders. We've talked about deacons. Let's talk about the congregation. The church is in need of the way in which you have been uniquely gifted and called. And again, it is the job of the shepherds of the church to help you discover that, to equip you to exercise that, and to multiply themselves into the flock to exercise these gifts. Probably one of the most powerful messages that I've ever heard in my life. This is many, many years ago, actually at our church in Fort Lauderdale. Pastor comes out. It was a Wednesday night midweek service. We actually had church on Wednesday nights. And if many of you might be too young to understand this visual aid that he provided, but he walked out. Remember the old like road maps that would fold? You'd buy them at the gas station, and they'd fold up and you'd unfold them, and then you have to only go back one way in order to work. So he walks out with this road map, and he's talking about, these road maps, and they're kind of a pain, and you unfold them, and then they only go back one way, and you're like, wait, that's not the cover, and you start over. And basically his sort of thesis statement was, to find your fold. That this map only folds up one way. How has God uniquely gifted you and called you to serve this body? Find your fold. And that just always stuck with me. I remember hearing that and thinking, man, that's I'll never forget that. Okay, so I want to close by reading two texts. They're a little lengthier, which is why I didn't put them on the screen. I thought we would just read them together to really get a picture of this idea of the role of the congregation in service to the larger mission of our church. Okay? And he volunteers to read 1 Corinthians. Logan's going to read 1 Corinthians 12 through 27. Go ahead, Logan.
12 through 27?
Yes.
I'm going to read from ESV. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow the greatest honor. And our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it, that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Now you are the body of Christ and individually members of it.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. One church, many members, many parts, uniquely gifted. Thank God for those of you in this room that are gifted in ways that I am not. I need you. We need each other. If we're going to be an ordered church that is made up of parts, interrelated with one another, and striving towards the same goal, man, we're going to embrace and understand that concept in 1 Corinthians 12. Next up, Ephesians 4, 1 to 16. Go ahead, Mike. Thank you.
I therefore, and I'm reading from the ESV, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. In saying he ascended, what does it mean but that he had also descended into the lower regions, the earth? He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow, so that it builds itself up in love. Now this I say, and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as Gentiles do in the futility of their minds.
Thank you. Powerful, and something to contemplate later today as well. There's so much there, but just again, this idea that we're giving gifts by the grace of God, and we're called to exercise them. In that message I talked about called Finding Your Fold, the pastor defined calling as this: giftedness plus passion equals calling. And he went on to say, oftentimes we tend to super spiritualize calling, but he made the argument that this is just a discovery of the ways in which God has gifted you and the ways in which He has given you passions, right? Psalm 37:4, one of my favorite verses: delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Okay? That doesn't mean, I desire a Ferrari, He's going to give it to me. No. That if we're delighting in Him, we can trust that the desires of our heart are from Him, and we want to explore what those are and act on them. Okay? Role of the congregation. Continuing, church as an ordered household. Again, this is not pastors do ministry and people receive ministry, but pastors equip people and the saints do it. Okay? And that's why this next text is so important. This is a text I'm sure you're familiar with. In Hebrews, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And certainly we use this text in the context of, hey, come to church. But it's so much more than just coming to church on a Sunday morning, right? Your place here in the body is needed by everyone who's sitting around you right now, right? Deploy those gifts, utilize those gifts, discover those gifts. You've been uniquely gifted to do that. Okay? Now, what does this look like as we wrap this up when we squander that, when we fail to discover that? Final text that we'll read together, if I could get a volunteer to read Matthew 25. Peyton, what do you think?
Sure. You got it. I'm silly. I didn't even bring my Bible.
That's okay. Neither did I forgot mine too.
All right, good. I'm not alone. Matthew 25. I have the CSB.
Okay.
It says, "For it is just like a man about to go on a journey. He called his own servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, depending on each one's ability. Then he went on a journey. Immediately the man who had received 5 talents went, put them to work, and earned 5 more. In the same way the man with 2 earned 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 talents approached, presented 5 more talents, and said, 'Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I've earned 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy.' The man with 2 talents also approached. He said, 'Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I've earned 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy.' The man who had received 1 talent also approached and said, 'Master, I know you. You're a harsh man, reaping where you haven't sown and gathering where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid and went off and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours.' His master replied to him, 'You evil, lazy servant. If you knew that I reap where I haven't sown and gather where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and I would have received my money back with the interest when I returned.' So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have more than enough. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And throw this good-for-nothing servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Whoa. So gifts have been entrusted to us. We don't own them. We're stewards of them, right? And our calling is to use them for the furtherance of the kingdom, right? You see, in the economy of God, he gives, and then when we utilize those things faithfully, he gives more. And then when we utilize those things faithfully, he gives more, right? If you're, faithful in the little, he will give you much. And it's kind of just a beautiful picture here where, the one who went from 5 to 10 and the one that went from 2 to 4, equally honored. Well done, good and faithful service. Back to this idea of the varied grace of God that we saw in the previous text. So discover your gift, be a steward of it. It's not yours to hide under a rock. It's yours to deploy. Don't look around and go, I wish I had that gift. My gift's not that important. It's not true at all. And if you, sitting here this morning, don't know how God has gifted you and called you, let's get coffee, like really soon. And let's start to unpack that. And in fact, we as a leadership team have been talking about potentially even hosting a little ministry fair, maybe in this room, where all the different opportunities to serve in our church, and maybe even ones we've yet to discover, are sort of on display. And you can, there's resources out there that will help you discover what your spiritual gifts are. If you want help with that, again, let's meet up, let's have a conversation. Don't let time pass too much longer if you're in this place of, I don't know what my spiritual gift is. I don't know how God's calling me to serve in this church. Okay? Awesome. Last 3 sessions coming up. April 11th. By the way, May 9th is now not May 9th because Pastor Luke will be out walking at his graduation. So that is now, if you want to make note, not the second Saturday of May, but the 4th Saturday, May 23rd. That's a reschedule. So April 9th, May 23rd, June 13th, as we wrap up this semester on ecclesiology. All right. Guys, thanks for being here. It's an honor to be with you and interact with the text together. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, pleasure.